You're never going to see a pharmaceutical lab washing ice and water to shake off plant matter. They're probably going to be using a hydrocarbon system. It's a much more scientific approach, much more accurate, much more repeatable. Realistically, I don't think we should be telling people about this on the podcast.
When you're processing with a solvent such as butane, you're able to extract, pretty much 95 to 99% of the active ingredients in there. Typically, what we see is, about anywhere from 1 to 2% left in the biomass. So if you're starting with 20%, you're leaving about 1 to 2% behind. So it's not a complete full extraction, but it's as much as you can possibly pull without pulling more undesirables. While with solventless, what do you think? I don't know exactly what percentage they're leaving behind of the overall extract, but I would imagine it's
significant.
Yeah,
absolutely significant. A high yielding plant, as far as a lot of these processes are concerned, is 4%. And I'm convinced people who accept that number just kind of gave up because everyone tells you that. When Pure Pressure was still around, they always used to say that was an optimal number and everything. And a lot of these other companies I've noticed have followed those old blogs they were posting talking about that. And it's outdated information these days. I mean, I've literally been given cuts before when I was doing this myself that I got 9% in my garage. And that shouldn't be happening as far as a lot of people are concerned. But it definitely can if people don't give up on this. And part of that comes from people not knowing how to trim this up properly. A lot of people, again, I like to associate this with the Pure Pressure old blogs as well. They used to recommend golf ball sized nugs, which if you've ever pulled the nugs out of the washing unit after you've done this, you'll see just how many trichomes and glands are still on there. And if you break one of those golf balls up, the inside is full of trichome heads. And if people trim smaller from the base of the stem, they can actually bump those yields up a ton. And always kind of surprises me how blind people go on that. And again, it's a lot of this miseducation. Pure Pressure, again, keep revisiting that because they're not around anymore and people still follow the advice. They used to talk about how the ice water, when it's in the bath, would allow the trichomes to slip out of the cracks from the center of the nug. They would claim that almost all of the trichomes get knocked off. But in reality, if you're claiming 4% coming off the weight of your fresh frozen, you're probably missing out on some opportunities there. Because on average, you're probably putting nugs testing at 25% in there. It's not optimal.
You're definitely leaving like 15 to 20% behind. Right.
Just in the THC alone.
Yeah,
like
of the overall yield. Yeah,
absolutely. And then not to mention, as soon as that melt is shaken off at that yield, then you're lucky to get 80% from your press.
Right.
Obviously, if you're making 6-star full melt, that can probably go up a little bit, but most people aren't, especially at scale. Like you mentioned earlier, you got 710 labs producing some really good stuff, and a lot of people struggle because if your SOPs aren't dialed in and you mess up one little thing, or even worse, one of your employees messes up one little thing, it can ruin the product, and it can turn something that would be selling off the shelf in a dispensary for 70 a gram. Now you're struggling to move it for 10. And it can just be down to a slight difference in color, slight difference in smell, even the appearance. It changes so much, and people get so snobby before even having a taste.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the part you mentioned about, the solventless process, how, you're trying to keep the nug size a certain size so you don't have like too small of a particle size where you're extracting a lot of plant compounds with it, but trying to find like a perfect way to get as much surface area exposed while not necessarily like grinding up destroying all the trichome heads. You're basically trying to preserve the trichome heads while extracting a maximum amount. And it's hard to do that with a physical like water agitation process, because you're basically like knocking off the trichome heads and collecting that. And with like a solvent method, you're dissolving those active, compounds into the solvent and then filtering it and whatnot. So it's a much different process altogether, and I think that also yields a much different product overall. You get much different yields. The economics of the overall process completely changes in terms of like what you have to charge for the product, and you're basically like left with a product that has to fetch a certain dollar amount because you left 20% yield behind. And so,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's insane the difference that they go through. It's almost, I like to consider the difference between the pharmaceutical industry versus solventless. You're never going to see a pharmaceutical lab washing ice and water to shake off plant matter. They're probably going to be using a hydrocarbon system. It's a much more scientific approach, much more accurate, much more repeatable. There's way too many factors that go into these things to not be able to rely on that repeatability that you get from hydrocarbons.
Yeah, I can't imagine like how the economics would change if there was a process to pull the remaining 20% while still staying solventless. I would imagine the whole market would shift in terms of what the cost of rosin is and all that as well.
It'll be a dramatic change. Realistically, I don't think we should be telling people about this on the podcast.
Well, cheaper, rosin and cheaper products. It doesn't hurt us as consumers. So.
No, exactly. That's great for me, and I'm happy to see it. But also, that's not always a good thing. Like on our trip recently to Jersey for MJ Unpacked, right? One of the things I noticed was whether they were hydrocarbon sellers or rosin sellers. Of course, out there was a lot more rosin sellers at the moment. Yeah. But the cost of these products to the consumers is still so much higher compared to Colorado or California that I noticed how excited these processors still were. They really wanted to get the best product out there and really show it off because they could afford to, because that price was there. They could actually justify making that product. Whereas if the consumers are excited about lower prices, that's great, but you got to expect what you pay for.
Yeah, it's crazy. In these new markets as well, like, there's way more people jumping into solventless because it's so much easier to get set up. Yeah. They can take their grow and go straight into a solventless process without all the hurdles they have with a solvent-based process. And so it's very interesting 100%. How these new markets are adopting, solventless versus a solvent-based process and why they choose to go with one or the other. And
it's less hurdles, less mental obstacles to have to deal with at the end of the day. I don't, especially like you can start a solventless thing very easily as a black market person as well. You don't have to tell anyone about any of the things you're setting up. You don't have to get that regulation sorted, and it's a nice feeling. It's very comfortable and anyone can get into it. I've got a lot more friends doing this in their garage than hydrocarbons.
No, definitely. And that's, you bring up a good point, because about 5-6 years ago, when rosin was starting to really take off, I saw a big shift in our customer base. Guys that were doing a lot of legacy extraction operations, they were all pivoting to solventless, not only because you're fetching more money and capturing more margin on your product. It was safer. It was easier for them to set up. They could teach someone easily. So it was just a much lower barrier of entry or barrier of staying in the market. And so, this process definitely brought about a whole different way to approach extracts overall for that side of the market as well.
Absolutely. And I think that was more of a revisit from previous stuff, because obviously hydrocarbons are relatively new in the terms of cannabis as a whole. Obviously rosin got popular more recently, but rosin is just a extension of old school Moroccan or Afghani hash from hundreds of years ago, thousands even. It's just that with an extra step added to the process. And for that reason, I think it's really cool, because you see these genetics from places that have been in the industry for a very long time, long before California was even a thing. And they're able to enter this industry in the extraction side where they literally can't with hydrocarbons. A lot of these farms and grows going on in Morocco, for example, out in the middle of nowhere, in places a lot more remote than most remote grows in America. And power is a huge issue. Infrastructure is a huge issue. Just having a freezer there is a huge issue. And not to mention, when that's done, they have to transport the stuff through the desert and hope it doesn't melt in a truck. And so many things that would make hydrocarbons just impossible for them. Nothing stopping them getting a bucket of water and washing some stuff. So it's allowing, Rosin is allowing processors from around the world to enter this, and not just stoners in their garage in America. You know, it's professionals who have been industry leaders that we've never even heard about are able to really expand their operations using this approach.
Yeah. No, I think the whole infrastructure comment is huge, because like here in California, there's a huge infrastructure to support a BHO lab. There's, you know, multiple suppliers selling chemicals and solvents and the daily needs that they have for the lab. But in Morocco, like, they're not finding a tank of unauthorized butane or dry ice or like any of those things. It's nearly impossible.
If you find it, then you got to hide from the law as well.
Exactly.
It's it makes it extremely difficult. But I am keen to see how these different parts of the world will improve on it, because I'd like to believe that Morocco probably has some hidden tricks up their sleeve with this process that we might not have even touched out here. I'd like to think that we have, and we've figured it all out, but I'd also love to see some new information coming from people.
Yeah, definitely.